I think this is a really tricky game for Penn State having to go on the road, but this will give us a great insight to who Penn State is right now. When you look at Drew Aller at the quarterback position, a new offensive coordinator, I think Drew will be asked to run the ball a little bit, extend some plays with his legs, and they'll be able to do that. The question will always be, when we talk about Penn State going back a couple of years now, is can they create explosive plays? Can they get back to running the ball with the consistency they had a couple of years ago? This will be really a telltale for them, and they need to find a guy who's going to be able to take the top off the defense and get those explosive plays out of the pass game. Anytime you go on the road, I think you have to be able to take a defense with you. This Penn State defense is going to be one of the best, I believe, in the country with Tom Allen, now the defensive coordinator. It'll be fun to see Abdul Carter really starting to play on the defensive line now. I'm sure he'll still be at the linebacker position in certain situations, but he's going to be a matchup problem for West Virginia up front. You don't know where he's going to line up, whether it's the right side, the left side, or over the center. He's going to create some problems. I really like the secondary matchup as well. There'll be some receivers for West Virginia that are going to be able to test the secondary of Penn State. But if Penn State can get the pass rush that they need, they'll be able to come up with some turnovers, and they'll need those turnovers to give their offense a short field.
Howard, you're the man. This is the big board. You see a couple of games on Thursday night that air right here on the Big Ten Network, another one on Friday. The Penn State-West Virginia game that Howard mentioned, one of the featured matchups on Saturday, and then it all wraps up not until Sunday night with USC and LSU. We are back, Rick Pizzo, Dave Revson, to talk about some of those games, and I do want to start where Howard started with that Penn State-West Virginia game, and I know they're going to be really good defensively. I am waiting to see what Andy Kotelnicki, the new OC, does with Drew Aller. Yes, they have the two guys back in the backfield in Singleton and Allen, and yes, they still probably have some questions to answer on the outside, finding explosive guys, but Aller has an NFL arm. I want to see it. I want to see him let loose a little bit, and I know you may not want to do that on the road against another power-type opponent, but you got to do it at some point. To me, you do it early, and you show the rest of the nation that we are willing to throw the ball around a little bit.
He threw it really well when we were there for practice. Andy Kotelnicki has an interesting offense. There's a lot of motioning there, a lot of keeping teams off balance, and I know the players really embraced it. They were enjoying it. I do think there's questions at wide receiver. They think Trey Wallace had a great camp, and so that maybe he emerges as a big-time weapon for them. We know about Julian Fleming, of course, as well. That, to me, is the big question mark, is do they have the weapons, kind of what you were talking about there. And West Virginia is the kind of team that maybe you try it on. They've got transfers in the secondary. They've got some players who they really are high on coming in. But communication, as you know, with new players, that becomes challenging. And so maybe this is a time where right away, to your point, you take some shots, but that's a challenging game. I mean, they're going to be fired up.
It's a tough place to play, too. If you've ever been to Morgantown, like, they are not the most hospitable.
So I've not been to a game there. Have you been there?
I have been there, and I've been to both a basketball and a football game there. And if you're on the opposing side, it's not the friendliest environment you've ever been in. But, I mean, Drew Aller has played right in the horseshoe.
No doubt.
And, I mean, you've been there before. So, to me, I want to see if you can take the top off a little bit. I just want to see it early in the season to establish that we're going to do this over the course of the year.
And if you win that game, man, I like their schedule.
Then it changes everything.
I think they're in really good shape. They do have to play Ohio State, but they don't have to play Michigan. They don't have to play Oregon. Like, I think they can make a run. And look, the preseason poll has them in the top 10, so it's not unreasonable to think this is a playoff team. I think there's a lot of pressure on them to be a playoff team this year.
I do, and I think a lot of questions there, quarterback, and questions in Lincoln were answered, right, when Matt Rule said Dylan Raiola is our guy, and that makes their season opener pretty intriguing.
No doubt. I'm so excited to watch Dylan Raiola. I will say this. We've been to a million of these training camps, and I've gotten it wrong a lot. There are times where you see someone. I think it's really important to remember, like, we're parachuting in for one day. Yeah. And sometimes you watch someone and they have a great day or they don't have a good day, and you extrapolate that that's what the season's going to be. But there's just some intangibles, Rick, where I feel like you can tell. And Dylan Raiola just has that. The ball comes out of his hand beautifully. He has a confidence about him. I love the way their schedule lays out. I think they have a chance to, I don't want to say ease into things, But UTEP's a team that you should be able to handle in the opener. And then Colorado, who knows? I think there's a lot of pressure on Nebraska to win that game against Colorado, but I don't know. I just feel like this is if they get a couple, kind of what we were talking about, if you get a couple under your belt, they're in good position.
And
they love their receiver core.
And they have a good running back. They have a deep running back room. They have veterans back there. They have what should be a pretty solid offensive line. Fedoni really underrated at the tight end position. I don't know. I mean, I do think, though, you probably treat this a little bit differently than the situation I just described with Drew Aller. I don't think you want Raiola going down the field, taking all sorts of shots early. You make some safe play calls, allow him to get some confidence. But I'm with you. I think this young man has everything to be an absolute star in this league, and I think probably sooner rather than later. Hey, speaking of sooner rather than later, we're going to get to see Minnesota very early, very soon, as a matter of fact. And I think there are a lot of questions with this Gopher team. You and I, we were just talking off camera. We both think PJ Fleck is an unbelievable football coach.
Fabulous.
When it comes down to X's and O's, fundamentals, his teams are always among the least penalized in the country. They have all those boxes checked. They can run the football, we know that. But Max Brosmer is a transfer QB who comes in from UNH. It's a different level of football. I've heard various reviews from folks that have seen him throughout training camp, and their schedule is not an easy schedule. I think that PJ will get the most out of this team. I just think even against a North Carolina team that's not supposed to be great, it is a Power 4 team. You can tell a lot about how you match up with a team that I think is a little bit comparable in its own league.
Very interesting game. I love that it's at home for Minnesota. I think that helps them a lot. Brosmer, again, you parachute in for a day. Brosmer didn't have a great day the day that we were there. It was very early in camp, and I know that they're very excited about him, but he wasn't great. So I agree with you. They're going to be able to run it. Darius Taylor being healthy, if he stays healthy all year. But then they have C.A. Bangura, who they brought in from Ohio University, who they really like, and you can see why. He's a versatile guy. They have a deep backfield, and their offensive line is really good. I think, to me, the big question is they took a step back defensively last year. Like, if you look at the things that went wrong, I understand the pass game was poor a season ago, but the defense was not at the level that it had been the previous 2 years, which was really good.
Yes.
So maybe that's a little bit unfair. But that, to me, is going to be interesting. You got UNC. They got Max Johnson throwing it around, replacing Drake May, highly touted kid. So that's a really interesting one. USC and LSU is a fascinating
last game of the weekend
as well. It is in Vegas. I mean, you were talking about kind of, hey, Minnesota, you're playing North Carolina, maybe kind of a comparable Power 5 team. USC and LSU are somewhat comparable as well. And again, new quarterback at LSU, Jaden Daniels, isn't there anymore. So, and big sigh of relief from USC for that. But the question mark with USC is how good is the defense? You're going to find out right away against LSU.
Well, Lincoln Riley has made no bones about it. He said that my biggest move this year was not in recruiting. It was not in getting us ready to transition to the Big Ten. It was getting Dan Lynn to come from UCLA to USC. And you can say everything, but you have to prove it. And USC's defense has not proven it in recent years. When you have Caleb Williams and you're scoring those points and you can't get to the spot that you want to be, then the question becomes, how do you fix the area that badly needs to be fixed? We'll see if Dan Lynn is that guy. I do want to touch on Iowa because I think it's an interesting game to watch. Kirk Ferentz will be suspended along with John Budmeyer. Seth Wallace is the acting head coach. It's the first game for Tim Lester as the OC. And, oh, by the way, we haven't had an announcement yet as to whether it would be Cade McNamara or Brendan Sullivan. It's a game Iowa should still easily win, but there are a lot of questions to be answered in week one.
There are a ton of questions. I think we kind of look at this Iowa team. I look at them as a dark horse playoff team. I think they have a really favorable schedule.
They do.
You have to get better quarterback play. And the reports out of camp are that they have not gotten better quarterback play. So can you figure something out? I think Tim Lester, given his track record, it's a really good hire. But, you know, again, kind of to your point, what is this going to look like? Not necessarily in week one, but what does it look like week two against a really good Iowa State team?
And I'll say this, whoever is the quarterback in week one, I think it's a very short leash because that other guy is waiting behind, and that's a tough situation.
So those are the games to keep an eye on in week one. Of course, we'll be talking about all of them.
All of them.
Next week.
All 18.
18 games.
18 of them,
to talk about.